Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles. There are plenty of articles that are important for both prelims and mains, and they require a detailed and thorough analysis, and few small topics which are relevant only for the prelims exam. But let's cover all these topics in complete detail so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Before we start, if you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So before I start the discussion, I have one important announcement for those who are preparing for 2026 and 2027. Unacademy is offering the most comprehensive online classes for IAS aspirants, and this program will give you access to all our online lectures by our top educators, along with the study material, the test series, the mentorship, and as well as doubt resolution sessions. Now you can avail this program at a massive discount of 55%. The 15-month subscription is available at just 23,999 and 18-month subscription at 25,999. I'm stressing on this offer today because today is the last day of this offer. As in, by tomorrow, the offer will come to end. So you basically have another day left, essentially. The 22nd Feb would be the last day of the offer. To avail this offer, you need to enter the code IAS English. So those who are interested, click on the subscription link provided in the video description box below and enter the code IAS English. Then please join my Telegram channel by scanning the QR code, because after the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF of the session on my Telegram channel. With this, let's get started and look at this interesting article on page number 10 related to Indian economy. See, we've always discussed, based on different articles in the Hindu, that reviving consumption in the Indian economy is essential to boost demand and thus promote growth in the Indian economy. Those of you who have been attending our sessions regularly, you would be aware that we have had this discussion multiple times, that one way to revive growth and boost economic activity is to bring back demand by boosting consumption. So you can boost consumption by placing additional money in the hands of our people, by slightly increasing the income of our workers, placing more cash through welfare schemes, by directly transferring cash into the hands of the targeted beneficiaries to try and boost consumption at the grassroots so that local demand, domestic demand can be created, which will drive economic growth and opportunities. So this has been one strategy, one approach that we have always discussed to promote growth. But this article doesn't agree with this approach. This insightful, detailed article tells us why consumption-led model for promoting growth is a wrong model. It's an incorrect approach. So to understand this topic, we need to go beyond the article and we need to look at some basic concepts. Then I'll be drawing a very interesting parallel between India's growth model and the growth model that China has followed, so that you'll understand what are the drawbacks of a consumption-led growth model and what China has exactly done. How does it compare with India's consumption-led growth model? So before we talk about the comparison between India and China, you need to understand a few basic concepts. See, growth in the economy, economic activities in the economy, is dependent on two very important conditions: the supply and demand condition. Supply refers to the production of essential goods and services. Demand basically refers to the consumption of those goods and services. In an ideal economy, to sustain growth, both supply and demand should go hand in hand. It's like two ships which are tugged to each other. To make progress, both of them should progress at the same time. So let's say there is heightened demand in the economy, supply should match up, or the other way around. Let's say demand is falling and accordingly supply should also match that, so that the ideal growth conditions and the economic environment can be maintained. Or else too much excess supply when there is low demand could lead to a deflationary situation, and vice versa, excessive demand with no supply, with inadequate supply, could result in inflationary pressure. So either of these conditions are extreme conditions for the economy. Growth will either way suffer. Even when supply is constrained and there is very high demand, inflation will take a toll on the macroeconomic factors and the financial stability of the economy. And even when demand is not adequate, demand has fallen, crashed maybe, and supply remains, then there won't be enough buyers in the market. Consumption would not be happening. And this also leads to a deflationary trend, which can be equally dangerous, creating a vicious cycle of degrowth in the economy. Now, to get out of this cycle and to boost growth, to ensure that there is adequate demand in the economy and supply parallelly, so that both these ships can sail together, what you need is consumption and investment. Now, there are two types of consumption and investment each. To ensure that growth can be sustained, you need consumption and investment. And there are two types of consumption and two types of investment. So let's understand what is this. One is private consumption and private investment. The other is public consumption and public investment. Now, what do you mean by this? When I say private consumption, I am referring to the basic necessities that we all consume in our private life. Individuals, the citizens of the country, even the private companies as well. What they consume on a regular basis, the essentials and some of the non-essentials. For example, the food items that we buy, the mobile phones, the automobiles, clothes, or some discretionary spending like taking a vacation or buying some new clothes on festivals, buying appliances, for example. So this combined together, what is bought essentially at the retail level by individuals and even by private companies, what they buy as part of their essentials and non-essentials becomes part of the consumption. This is something you need for day-to-day survival, right? So consumption can be private, which is in the hands of individuals and private entities. Now, what is private investment? The investment, the very term investment often refers to long-term investment. When you're spending something on long-term, when you're spending something on something substantial, creating an asset, that becomes an investment. So for retail individuals, buying a house, buying a piece of land, a property, for example, becomes an investment. Similarly, for private industries, the capital expenditure they incur in procuring new machinery, in building a new factory, in creating more jobs, that becomes investment for a private corporation. So I hope now the difference between consumption and investment is getting clear. So when we talk about private consumption and investment, private consumption refers to our day-to-day consumption at the private level. Investment refers to anything which is long-term asset creation that's happening in the economy through private investments, through private expenditure. Similarly, there will be public consumption and public investment, which is basically what your government is spending on its consumption and investment. So government consumption refers to the operational expenses of the government. To function, the government needs certain materials, goods, components, services. It has to pay salaries to the government employees. So all of this becomes government consumption, public consumption, which is taking care of the day-to-day operational needs of the government. Investment again would be long-term asset creation, where government allocates capital expenditure to create infrastructure, for example, to build roads and railway lines, to create airports, or to set up telephone and internet and power infrastructure. So this basically requires large scale investment for the long term to create these long lasting assets in the economy. So that is what we refer to as government investment or public investment. Now, when you compare consumption versus investment to understand what is better for the economy, there is no doubt that investment-led model any day is better for promoting economic growth, for sustaining demand, and for maintaining supply parallelly. Why? Because investment-led model of expenditure, it has a multiplier effect on the economy. Now, what do you mean by this multiplier effect? Let's take an example. Let's say the government is trying to build a new expressway, which is a long-term capital creation which is happening in the economy. Now, this expressway which the government is going to build, it's part of government investment, public investment. It falls under that category. So, when the government incurs this expenditure and creates this long-lasting, long-term capital asset, it will not only have some immediate gains for the economy, because those who execute the project, they will hire a lot of people, workers will get employment, their incomes will go up, a lot of components, goods and commodities are bought for this project, which creates economic activity. Plus, the very creation of that expressway could create ancillary activities around the expressway. New industries might prop up, new towns and residential growth might happen, or restaurants and various commercial business enterprises will come up along that road, creating related economic activities. This is what we call as the multiplier effect. It triggers exponential activities. It not only leads to direct growth, it contributes to several indirect economic activities which is even difficult to even compute and quantify. So investment-led growth will always have a long-term multiplier effect, which you do not see in consumption-led growth model. In consumption-led growth model, the idea is temporarily boost demand by making more cash available to the people so that they will buy more. And this will push the private sector to invest, to increase their supply, to increase their production, thereby creating some economic activity. While this model will create growth, it is not long lasting, it's not sustainable in the long run. More importantly, it has many drawbacks and shortcomings. A consumption-led growth model will create more inequalities in the society. Because those who have enough money in their hands, the rich, the middle class, they will do well in a consumption-led economy because they have enough money to spend, and any move by the government, by the RBI to place more money in the hands of the people will benefit the rich, the upper class, the middle class, whereas those who do not have the financial resources and livelihood opportunities, they will continue to suffer. Your economy will never witness equitable growth. It will not be inclusive growth as well. And you also notice that per capita income will stagnate. Per capita income will not really jump when you just focus on consumption-led model for your economic growth. Whereas investment-led growth model will create long-term assets. It will have the multiplier effect, generating multiple economic activities. Several ancillary related economic activities get triggered, creating real jobs for the people, genuinely increasing income across the board. Incomes will go up for people, not just for the rich and the upper class and the middle class, but even for the poor and the lower classes. Job generation will increase income, putting genuine money in their hands, which is long lasting, which is sustainable. And this kind of demand is what is needed to create a self-sustaining cycle of growth. This growth model will be more fair and equitable and inclusive. And more importantly, it will help in actually increasing per capita income as well. Now, this is the concept that you need to understand. When you compare the two models of growth, consumption-led model and investment-led model, any day investment-led model is better for the economy because of its multiplier effect. Now, based on this, let's compare the model of India and China that we have seen in the last 3 decades. Now, see, this chart that the Hindu has provided is very insightful. This graph is basically telling us the investment that China has made as a percentage of its GDP over the last 3 decades compared to that of India's investment as a percentage of its GDP. Plus, it is also depicting the per capita income levels of China and India and how it has changed in the last 3 decades. See, in 1990s, when India had just initiated the LPG economic reforms, China had already opened up its economy. Both India and China were at exactly the same level, almost exactly the same level with regard to per capita income. Can you notice this here? The origin of the blue and the maroon line in this graph depicts per capita income of India and China. In early 1990s, the average income of an Indian and a Chinese was almost at the same level. When you compare this with per capita income of United States, our per capita income was 1.5% of the average American per capita income. Both India and China were at the same level. Now, can you take a guess by looking at this graph? What is the per capita income in China today? What is the per capita income in India today? There is a massive difference that you find. Look at how the graph diverges somewhere in early 2000. You can see the divergence occurring over here, and you almost see an exponential growth in China's per capita income, whereas India's per capita income stagnates, remains almost constant. Today, India's per capita income is just 3% of the per capita income in the United States. Essentially, our average per capita income has just doubled from 1990s till now. But look at China. China's per capita income today is at 15% when compared to the per capita income of United States. Look at the massive jump that China has seen. Why did this happen? The writer believes this is because of the model of growth that India and China have followed. India has largely followed a consumption-led model with very little focus on investment-led growth, whereas China has pioneered investment-led growth model, not just from the 1990s. In fact, China started stepping up its public and even private investment as early as 1970s itself. It is this cumulative multiplier effect that China has created in its economy, which has generated sustainable, long-lasting, and more inclusive and equitable growth in China. If you look at China's investment rate as a percentage of its GDP, if you take the aggregate of both public and private investment, China's investment as a percentage of its GDP has consistently remained in the range of 38 to 45%. Look at this orange line. Investment increases in China over the last 3 decades, though there are certain falls, but it revives and it sustains, showing high levels of investment occurring in the Chinese economy. Today, almost 44% is the number for China with regard to its investment as a percentage of its GDP. Now look at India's curve, the blue line. In 1990s, our investment as a percentage of GDP was somewhere in the low 30 ranges, around 30-31%. It did increase in early 2000 as the Indian economy was booming following the LPG reforms. In late 90s, early 2000, we did see a big jump in our investment happening. As a result, you see the investment as a percentage of GDP curve growing up to 37, 38, 39% of our GDP. Then, look at this period. From 2006 to 2009, look at the change that happens here. The way we dealt with the global economic crisis of 2008-2009, the financial crisis, the recession, this model that India-China followed was starkly different. While China doubled down on public investment and private investment, India gave some stimulus during the recession. But post 2012, you see a significant fall in investment happening in India. Look at China's investment percentage with regard to its GDP rising up and maintaining at a constant level in the range of 38-39%, growing above 42 to 44%. Whereas India's investment as a percentage of its GDP has fallen after 2012. It has declined, it has come down, and today it's just around 32%, around that. Though the Modi government has done pretty well in the last 3 years to increase capital expenditure and public investment, still it doesn't It doesn't help us counteract the negative impact of low investments of the last 15 to 20 years. So post 2008 and especially post 2012, we saw a decline in public investment and private investment. Private investment has almost stagnated. Government investment has fluctuated with some increase here and there, but it has not been sufficient. Look at the graph here, which compares household investment in India, how it has changed compared to private investment and public investment. India's private sector has not only kept its investment stagnant, you even see a decline occurring in last few years, which means they don't have confidence in the Indian economy regarding sustained growth. They're holding on to their investment. Government investment has increased sometimes, declined sometimes, but more or less it is stagnant and consistent despite the increased capital expenditure of the last 3 years with the Modi government. Household expenditure has been fluctuating, obviously, depending on the other macroeconomic factors. So lower investment in India is one of the prime reasons why it is difficult for us to create sustained growth and equitable inclusive growth. This is the big difference you find between India and China. Now, if you don't believe me, look at this table. Very insightful data present here. In India, private consumption, that is what we consume as retail customers, as individuals, and what the private industry consumes, constitutes 60% of our GDP. Majority of our GDP, which is the value of the goods produced essentially in a given fiscal, in a territory, it accounts for 60%. Private consumption accounts for 60%. The day-to-day consumption, the essential discretionary consumption which is happening, that is 60% of our GDP. Now look at China. Private consumption is just 39% of its GDP. So what does this tell you? It tells you that there is long-term asset creation which has happened in China in the last 40 to 50 years, which is now having a multiplier effect. So no wonder you see that exponential curve in China where its per capita income has jumped significantly in the last 2 to 3 decades, whereas India's has almost stagnated and the jump that you see is very, very less, very minimal. So this is the key takeaway from this article. A very conceptual article. It's a little complex, but I've tried to break it down. I hope you guys have understood this important concept. UPSC might ask a question asking you to compare consumption-led model of growth versus investment-led model of growth, or compare the model of growth followed by India and China in the last 3 decades. So please be prepared for this. It's a very conceptual question. You need to bring in some data and some details into your answer to substantiate your argument. So please try to write an answer for this question. Take it as a practice question and post your answers in the comments so it can help other students as well. Now let's look at another important article on page number 9 related to the topic of free speech and whether the right to free speech provides us the right to take offence. The right to free speech and expression, does it include the right to take offence at the statements of another individual? This is the debate being presented in this article. In fact, the Hindu carries an interview on this topic with eminent experts, with a leading advocate, a very well-known advocate, Dushyant Dave, and Justice Gautam Patel, a former judge of the Bombay High Court. So clearly, both are leading experts in the legal domain and in constitutional matters. The Hindu conducts an interview with them and it has provided a transcript of this interview. Now, let me break this down, but first let's set the context. Why is free speech in news? Why is this topic being debated right now? I'm sure all of you recognize the influencer in this image, Ranveer Allahabadia, popularly known as Beer Biceps on his social media handles. He has recently gotten himself into a controversy following inappropriate comments that were made in a comedy show which has been quite viral and popular on YouTube. So there has been a lot of criticism against what Ranveer Allahabadia stated. In fact, against the show itself, India's Got Talent, which was led by comedian Samay Raina. It has attracted a lot of criticism and controversy. It has even led to FIRs being filed against these content creators and influencers. Police in Mumbai and in other parts of the country have taken up investigations as well. Now, this is where the question comes up. how do you define obscenity? To what extent can profanity, obscenity be used in public speaking, for example? Does right to free speech protect your right to offend someone? Or can someone take offense based on the statements that others have made? This is the interesting debate that the Hindu is bringing out with two eminent experts. So let's break down this topic. Let's look at this in a completely unbiased manner. The first question posed by the Hindu is that, does the Constitution account for a right to take offense at any form of speech? The answer is very clear to this question. There is no right to take offense. The right to free speech, I'm sure all of you are aware of this, at least you're familiar with this constitutional provision. This fundamental right is guaranteed under Article 19. Article 19 provides you the right to free speech and expression, which also includes the right to free press, the right to creative expression as well, creative and artistic expression. But however, this is not an absolute right. It's not an absolute right. In the name of free speech, you can't say anything you want. You can't express anything that you want. There are certain reasonable restrictions that have been placed. Now, what are these reasonable restrictions? Let's take a look. Our founding fathers, the constitution makers of India, they were very clear that right to free speech and expression cannot be absolute. It has to be restricted on certain grounds. But the reasonable restrictions have to be narrowly defined. It should be as narrow as possible so that there is no scope for discretion. Because tomorrow, if broad reasonable restrictions are placed, then the state can misuse the discretion, the subjectivity, to target free speech and dissent and criticism, leading to an authoritarian democracy. The right to free speech and expression is a critical fundamental right in a democracy, the right to criticize anyone, which includes the right to humor. If you take comedy in this case, right? Comedy or any artistic form of creative expression has been a way to express dissent and criticism, to bring out the nature of our politics, our society, to highlight issues which can't be spoken about easily through the form of art, through movies, through stories, through articles, and that includes comedy, including roast comedy as well. But is there a line that should be drawn? Now, before we dive deeper into this, let me tell you what is the general opinion about this recent controversial incident. See, whatever was said on this particular show on YouTube, no doubt it was obscene. There is no doubt about it. It was obscene, it was highly profane, it was vulgar. So you can criticize it, you can condemn it, but should criminal charges be pressed against these comedians and influencers? That is the question being debated over here. Nobody can justify that statement that Ranveer Allahabadiya had made. So you can feel that it's an obscene statement. You can criticize him, stating that it is profane, it is vulgar, it's a thoughtless statement that was made. But can you curb someone's right to free speech just because someone said something that is obscene or profane? Now, in the society, let's look at our society honestly, with a transparent lens. In our society, isn't it a part and parcel of our social norms to use obscenity, profane words, vulgar words as well? So, art in any form is a reflection of the true nature of the society. So, you can disagree with these influencers and comedians, you can condemn them, criticize them, point out this was very obscene, you should not have said that, it was vulgar, or you can choose not to watch that at all. But can you press criminal charges against them, seeking their arrest and trying to curb their right to free speech? The experts here strongly disagree with this view. Both the former judge and the senior advocate, they both point out that what Ranveer Allahabadiya said was without a doubt obscene, vulgar. It was absolutely cheap comedy, thoughtless comedy. But should criminal charges be pressed against them and the right to free speech be curbed by stating that we have a right to take offense? The Constitution does not provide right to offense as a ground for restricting free speech. That's why you need to understand what are these reasonable restrictions on right to free speech. Article 19, it's not an absolute right. There are restrictions, but the restrictions are narrowly defined. Security of the state. If someone's speech or expression is affecting the security of the nation, then it can be restricted. If it is disrupting public order, leading to violence, or inciting hatred, it can be restricted. Even on the grounds of decency, morality, and other specific grounds, free speech can be curbed. Now, some of you might point out, sir, reasonable restriction says decency, morality is a ground for restricting right to free speech. So then, what Ranveer Allahabadiya said, isn't that a violation of decency and morality? But experts who are part of the interview, they clearly point out that the statement that was made, the vulgar, obscene statement that was made, it may not meet the legal threshold of decency and morality. Decency and morality, again, can be very subjective. What is decent according to you may not be decent according to me. What is moral according to you may not be moral according to me. So how do you define this? This is where we will learn a concept known as constitutional morality versus social morality. I'll come to that point a little while later. The experts here are strongly of the opinion that whatever Ranveer Allahabadiya said was obscene, vulgar, thoughtless, and cheap comedy. They criticize him as well, but they stand in defense of his right to say that statement. Please understand the difference. You can criticize the statement as obscene and vulgar, but the experts who have that incredible experience, they are standing in defense of Ranveer Allahabadiya's right to free speech, stating his right to say that cannot be curbed. Why? Because reasonable restriction doesn't apply. There is no reasonable restriction saying someone has a right to take offense. You just can't say that I got offended by someone's statement, so curb his right to free speech. That is not allowed under the Indian Constitution. Now, if you argue that his statement violates decency and morality, for that, the experts have an explanation. Constitutional morality versus social morality. See, morality itself is very subjective, as I told you. Decency is very subjective. So, when you are defining decency morality under Article 19 as a reasonable restriction, you need to apply constitutional morality, not what the society considers to be moral. What the majority consider to be moral is not the driving factor here. That's not the threshold being applied here. It is constitutional morality laid down through our constitution and the legal provisions that are there. So both the experts believe that right to free speech cannot be curbed on these grounds. They even refer to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's statement when Article 19 was being discussed and debated in the Constituent Assembly. Dr. Ambedkar was strongly of the view that in the larger interest of the nation, free speech has to be curbed to some extent through reasonable restrictions. So Ambedkar was supporting reasonable restrictions, but Ambedkar was very, very clear that these grounds on which free speech can be curbed, it should be as narrow as possible. If you give discretion here, if you give a very broad reasonable restriction, the state will misuse this tomorrow. Those who are in power will misuse this discretion to target dissent and criticism. Tomorrow they are going to curb your right to free speech. That is the death of a democracy, the destruction of the very foundation of a democracy. That is why Dr. Ambedkar stood in defense of right to free speech. He agreed that reasonable restrictions are needed to protect the security of the nation, to protect public order, to maintain some decency and morality. But decency morality is defined by constitutional morality, not by social morality. Not by what the majority thinks is right, but by what the constitution says, by what the legal system of the country says. So state can definitely impose restrictions, but you cannot claim that you got offended by someone's statement and then you can file a case and try to restrict someone's free speech. That is not allowed under the Indian Constitution. Now coming to the question of morality and decency. What is this constitutional morality and social morality? Social morality, as I told you, is what the society thinks is right. Morality is basically a set of values, a set of principles considered by the larger society as right or wrong. Now, yes, you need to follow certain values and principles in a society, but if you allow the majority to determine what is right or wrong, then this is going to curb the voice of the minority. Let's say someone has a dissenting opinion on a certain issue, on a certain topic, which may go against the popular majority view. You will not be able to express your minority view just because the majority feel what you're saying is not right. Now, let's say I'm a cartoonist. I draw satirical cartoons. I use my artistic creative expression to bring out the social issues in our country, to bring out the political problems in our country and to criticize our political leaders and the corruption in the system by drawing satirical cartoons. Now, if majority say that I am humiliating our leaders, our politicians through my cartoons, and if they say that the society has been offended by my cartoons, if the majority say that you can't humiliate leaders and politicians through your cartoons, should my right be curbed on that ground? Should the majority concept of morality, the social morality, which keeps evolving and changing with time, should that define my right to free speech? Just because someone gets offended, should right to free speech be curbed? In that case, nobody can speak anything. In that case, you'll be living in a totalitarian society where everything is censored, where everything is basically according to a set of uniform standards laid by an authoritarian government. If you don't want that dystopian future, you need to follow constitutional morality. Morality as defined by the Constitution. Morality as drawn from the Constitution and substantive law. This is what the experts feel, that social morality should not be determining the restrictions on free speech. What majority feels as offensive should not lead to curbs on free speech, according to these experts. It should be constitutional morality. As I said, you can choose to criticize these comedians. You can criticize anybody who makes obscene, vulgar, offensive statements. But should that be a ground to file cases, seek their arrest, threaten them, and curb their right to free speech? That is the big question being debated in this article. The writers even provide a beautiful illustration regarding the legality surrounding obscene speech and obscene art. In 1964, there was a very controversial book that came out, Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence, which contained a lot of sexually explicit content. This matter reached the court as well. As the so-called defenders of social morality, they filed cases against the book seeking a ban on this book. Then the Supreme Court in the Ranjit Udesi versus State of Maharashtra, it applied a very draconian orthodox doctrine, the Victorian era Hicklin test. What is this Hicklin test? It's of colonial origin, from colonial jurisprudence. According to Hicklin test, if some content, if it can push the society towards depravity, make the society corrupt, make the society fall under immoral influences, then such content can be banned by the state, by the law. Now, who gets to define what is a corrupt mind, or who gets to define immoral influences? Eventually, it falls to the discretion of those individual judges to interpret. So this is a very orthodox interpretation, and it had led to restrictions on right to free speech, and this controversial book was banned by the Supreme Court by applying this colonial era doctrine, the Hicklin test, that this book is going to corrupt our youth, is going to push them into immoral activities. So based on such arguments, which is basically the majoritarian argument, the social morality concept, the book was banned. Then in Avik Sarkar case, the Supreme Court applied community standards test. In a similar case regarding objectionable obscene content, the court applied community standards test, that if community feels something is obscene, we should not allow such content to be circulated. Again, the court was enabling social morality, allowing the society, the majority, to take over minority views and opinions. As I said, if something is obscene, who's forcing you to watch and listen to that? Who's preventing you from criticizing that obscene content? You have every right to critique that content. You criticize that creator. You disown them, you boycott them, you unfollow them. Why are you following such creators? Don't follow them. As simple as that. But don't file cases against them. Don't try to restrict their right to free speech. This essentially is what the experts are trying to bring out. See, India has been a land of tolerance, diversity, free speech and expression since ancient times. Or else, the erotic art that you find in our temples, Khajuraho, Konark, Belur, Halebeedu, that art would not have existed. That shows the progressive mindset that existed in our society at one point. It also shows how our social morality has in a way regressed over the centuries. From publicly displaying erotic art in temples at sacred places and worshipping it and revering it, celebrating it, to getting offended just by someone's obscene statements. Look how our society has degenerated and regressed. That is what the experts are bringing out. So you can't apply social moral standards, you can't apply what the community or the majority feels is obscene, and that can't be a ground for curbing someone's free speech. Personally, if you ask me as well regarding Ranveer Alabadia's incident, what Ranveer Alabadia said in that video is pure obscenity. Nobody can justify it. It is profane. It is vulgar. So criticize it. It was thoughtless comedy. This is a difference between thoughtless comedy and intelligent comedy. There are many comedians, if you have to take names, let's say Zakir Khan, Danish Seth, and Kenny Sebastian, who have made a big name for themselves through stand-up comedy and roast comedy as well. But they don't cross that line of obscenity. That is intelligent comedy for you. They bring humor through very smart jokes which are built into their narrative. But there are other content creators, influencers, many of them, as they are referred to as chapri influencers, who often try to create comedy through vulgarity, obscenity. Yes, it is condemnable. You can criticize them. Eventually, you can choose not to watch them. You don't have to support them. You don't have to follow them. Let them do what they do. But don't try to curb their free speech. As simple as that. Because today, if you try to curb their free speech, tomorrow someone will say what you are saying is also obscene. What journalists are saying is obscene. What politicians are saying is obscene. What artists and cartoonists are saying is obscene. They'll try to ban everything tomorrow. So this is where you draw the line. Now, if you want to ban obscenity, what about our politicians and leaders who keep on delivering hate speech after hate speech? Isn't this a threat to public order? Isn't it dividing our society? We have many top politicians, leaders and political parties promoting communal, social, ethnic divisions, caste-based divisions, especially during time of elections. Nobody takes action against this. Their free speech has not been curbed. In fact, there is a ironic joke as well that in our country, the people who enjoy the most freedom of speech is our politicians. They have no claims on their right to free speech because they can say anything. They can get away with it. They can even spew hatred, push one community against another, drive wedges between communities for votes. They get away with it. No action against them, no FIRs against them, no boycott calls against them. In our country, if anybody enjoys true freedom of speech, almost absolute freedom of speech, it is our politicians. That is what the experts are saying. You are not taking action against those inciting hatred in the society for votes, but you're trying to run behind comedians, artists, and creators, trying to ban their right to free speech. So this is what the society needs to debate upon. Now, let me know what you think is your view on this sensitive issue. I know it's a very sensitive subject, so let me know your views and opinions in the comments. One last point before I switch to the next article. The government is contemplating a new bill, the Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill, to regulate digital content. Digital content, which has often attracted such controversy on the grounds of obscenity, profanity, vulgarity, it is sought to be regulated. There's a lot of push from different quarters in the society, in the government as well, to regulate such digital content. So a Broadcasting Services Digital Bill is being contemplated by the government. So the Hindu is asking these experts their view on this proposal. Should we have a law to regulate digital content? Should we try to restrict certain types of digital content? The writers, that is the experts, are very clear that see, once you try to restrict free speech, you're going to set a dangerous precedent. There's no way you will stop this. It's a dangerous downfall from there onwards. Today you might say some jokes, some movies, some web series are obscene and vulgar, try to restrict and ban them. Tomorrow it will reach a point where someone will take offense to your genuine points of criticism against the government, against the state. So this will lead to the reduction of free space that is available for free speech and expression. So that is the end argument, the closing argument being made by the experts in this interesting interview that the Hindu has published. So please take up this practice question on free speech and the need to regulate obscene digital content. Let me know what you think as well. What is your view? Now let's look at another interesting article, editorial on page number 8 regarding water pollution in the Ganga in the context of the Kumbh Mela. As you know, the Kumbh Mela, a mega religious gathering, has already attracted millions of people. Government numbers place the total number of pilgrims for attending the Kumbh Mela at Prayagraj in the range of 45 to 54 crores. That is more than almost one third of the population of the country is expected to visit Prayagraj and take this spiritual journey. Of course, in Hinduism, the Kumbh Mela holds a lot of ritualistic, spiritual significance. There's no denying that. But there have been many controversies that have come up as well, given that it's the world's largest gathering of humans. It's no joke to organize the event. One has to give the fair share of credit to the government, the administration, which manages to pull off such a mega event. It's not easy to create the facilities, arrange the logistics. Yes, there have been many unfortunate incidents, stampedes. There have been complaints about the lack of amenities, the difficulties that senior citizens have faced. Yeah, right? Of course, you can criticize the administration on that, but still one needs to look at the scale, the gigantic scale at which the event is happening. But one important issue that comes up in the context of the Kumbh Mela is the quality of the water. Because millions of pilgrims take a dip to perform the sacred snan or the bath, which is believed to help the believer to get rid of their sins as a ritualistic cleansing, to imbibe the positive energy. Right? People believe in that. So the sacred bath, taking a dip in the holy waters of the Ganga during the Kumbh Mela, that too on special occasions, on certain Amavasyas, on Makar Sankranti, for example, is considered to be a very sacred and spiritual ritual. People drink the water as well, who consider it to be sacred, as a sacred offering from the gods, linked with the mythology of the Amrit Manthan event. Right? They consume the water as well as a sacred offering. Now, when people are taking a dip in the water, consuming and drinking that as a sacred offering, obviously water quality comes into question. That too when millions are gathering, because this raises serious sanitary and hygiene issues. See, faith is on one side, and at the same time, you need to keep in mind public health, the overall well-being of the society as well. See, the Ganga and all the tributaries, they have been known for their polluted waters, be it the urban sewage, the unscientifically disposed waste, industrial effluents, and this includes every unspeakable garbage, waste material floating around, from human feces to dead bodies to everything. So, given the question of water quality in the Ganga, it is a matter of public health, public sanitation and hygiene regarding the quality of the water maintained at the river. Now, recently a big controversy got triggered. The Central Pollution Control Board, which monitors water quality in the country, brought out a regular report. It regularly monitors water quality around the country in important water bodies, publishes the data publicly, and according to the CPCB report, the fecal coliform contamination in the waters of the Ganga has been exponentially high than the set limit, the safe limit. It's 4 to 5 times higher. That is the level of fecal contamination. This could be human feces, animal feces as well. So the expected threshold is somewhere around 2,500 units of fecal coliform contamination, but the reported contamination is at 11,000 plus units, 4 to 5 times than the prescribed threshold, which is considered to be safe. So this water, forget drinking, it's not even fit for bathing. This can lead to severe skin diseases, skin disorders. It can spread infections, lead to outbreak of diseases, and consuming it can be extremely toxic and dangerous as well. So when this is the case, we have government leaders making statements to deny these reports and to put down the scientific evidence. The editorial is referring to the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath, who dismissed these reports, stating the waters are clean to even drink. Imagine a Chief Minister making a statement like this when the data clearly shows that the water is highly polluted, highly contaminated. This is not just misleading the public, this is denial from the government. The editorial points out denial will not help anyone. Denying the existing fact will not help anyone. Now, this is where science and faith actually intersect. Science will help us purify, clean these waters if the existing schemes and plans are implemented properly. The National Mission for Clean Ganga, which has been a flagship scheme where the center is working with the state governments, putting in the best effort. But of course, the contamination levels fluctuate as well. The fecal coliform content and other hazardous toxic substances in the waters, the threshold keeps fluctuating. As in, when there is a fresh water flow, when the water gets diluted with fresh release of water, the parameters improve slightly. The water becomes fit for bathing, because there have been some days during Kumbh Mela itself where CPCB report shows the water quality had become very good. In fact, it was way below the dangerous threshold, making it very suitable for bathing and even sometimes for drinking. But there are days, occasions where pollution levels go up, shoot up rapidly, especially when the water has been stagnant for a long time, especially when fresh water has not been introduced. So then the water not only becomes unfit for drinking, it becomes unfit even for bathing. So in such circumstances, on those days, it is important for the administration, the government, to spread the right message, to alert, to warn the people and take appropriate immediate measures to clean the waters, to ensure that we tackle pollution not just as a short-term measure just for Kumbh Mela, but as a long-term measure for the environment and for the safety of our own people. So misleading the people, denying the facts will not serve any purpose. Science can help faith, faith can help science. This is the intersection that you see here. That's what the editorial is pointing out. Use these scientific facts, come out with better schemes, initiatives, treat the sewage, handle the waste materials better, set up sewage treatment plants, come out with scientific methods of managing the water. Let the people who believe in the event, let them come and celebrate and worship in a clean environment. Don't give them a polluted environment and say that everything is right, everything is fine. So this is where the editorial says it is unacceptable for leaders to deny existing facts and mislead the public. Next, on the front page itself, we have an article regarding a very controversial development which has taken place in our polity. I am sure all of you have heard about an ombudsman known as the Lokpal. Under Lokpal and Lokayukta Act 2013, this ombudsman institution was set up to basically keep a check on corruption in the government. So Lokpal is mainly mandated with the responsibility to check corruption within the central government or any body which is set up through an act of parliament or any body that is funded partially or wholly by the government. So any such entity, organization which has been set up by the central government or by act of parliament or funded wholly or partially by the government falls under the jurisdiction of Lokpal. Lokpal can maintain its vigilance with the help of Central Vigilance Commission, investigate cases of corruption with the help of CBI in order to tackle corruption within the central government and its bodies. I'm sure many of you are aware of this ombudsman institution and its role and responsibility. Now, recently, the Lokpal passed a controversial order that has raised eyebrows. Lokpal issued an order a few weeks ago stating that High Court judges are also under its jurisdiction. Now, this has shocked the judicial community, the legal community, and Supreme Court has taken up the matter as well. It forced the Supreme Court to stand up and take notice of this order by Lokpal that Lokpal has jurisdiction over High Court judges. Because Lokpal had received a complaint regarding an alleged case of corruption involving a High Court judge and few lower court judges. While looking into this matter, Lokpal issued this order stating High Court judges are under the jurisdiction and ambit of Lokpal. Now, this order is extremely controversial because this threatens to violate the doctrine of separation of powers, which is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. For a healthy democracy, you need to have a clear distinction between the three main pillars of democracy: the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. If one oversteps into the domain of the other, into the jurisdiction of the other, it will compromise the independence of those institutions. For Lokpal to have direct jurisdiction over High Court judges would basically bring the executive into the domain of the judiciary. Though Lokpal is considered to be a more independent, autonomous ombudsman, eventually Lokpal appointments are done by the government, which allows the government to exercise a degree of control on the functioning of Lokpal directly or indirectly. So if Lokpal were to exercise jurisdiction and take up corruption cases against High Court judges, that would be a direct breach of doctrine of separation of powers, where the executive would be essentially overstepping into the domain of the judiciary, threatening the very independence of the judiciary itself. That's why the Supreme Court has taken notice of this and it has issued a stay order. It has stayed the order of the Lokpal and it has kept the matter for further examination. Now, there is one very important, interesting point you need to understand here. On what basis did Lokpal issue this order? If Supreme Court has stayed the order stating that Lokpal can't claim this jurisdiction, there must have been some basis, some logic based on which Lokpal passed this order stating that High Court judges are under its mandate. So let's look at this. It can be very important for your prelims as well. See, the High Courts, their origin goes back to colonial times. Even before the Constitution was adopted, even before India became independent, the High Courts were set up through British Parliamentary Acts. This is the justification used by Lokpal. In this order, Lokpal has mentioned that, look, High Courts in the country, they don't owe their origin to Article 214 of the Indian Constitution. They owe their origin to British Parliamentary Acts such as Indian High Courts Act 1861, Government of India Act 1935, which means they were set up through an Act of Parliament, thus bringing it under the jurisdiction of Lokpal. Because Lokpal Lokayukta Act states that any body, entity, organization set up through an Act of Parliament or part of the government, wholly or partially funded by the government, falls under the jurisdiction of Lokpal. So if High Courts were set up in colonial era through acts of the British era Parliament, then Lokpal is now claiming jurisdiction on that. Lokpal order states Article 214 that provided for the High Courts. It only accounted for the existence of those High Courts. High Courts already pre-existed the Indian Constitution and Article 214 simply gave constitutional recognition to it. And Lokpal order says why Supreme Court is not under its jurisdiction is because Supreme Court in the current form was set up post-independence through Article 124. Thus, Lokpal has said in the order that it has no jurisdiction over Supreme Court and its judges, including Chief Justice of India, but it wants to claim jurisdiction on High Courts, given that they were set up through British Parliamentary Acts. This is the logic, the basis on which Lokpal has issued this order, but Supreme Court has stayed this order. There will be a further examination whether this order is constitutional or not. Next, we have an update on India-Bangladesh border-related issues. Recently, the border guarding forces of India-Bangladesh met the BSF, Border Security Force, and Bangladeshi border guards, the border guards of Bangladesh, the BGB. They held a very important meeting. This is their first meeting since the crisis in Bangladesh. Since Sheikh Hasina was removed, since Sheikh Hasina's regime was toppled and the new interim government was installed, this is the first ever meeting between our border security forces. See, this border with Bangladesh is very sensitive, very crucial for India. It's the longest land boundary of India. I hope you're aware of that. It stretches to almost 4,096 kilometers long. And there are many challenges present. It's a highly porous border because of the complex geography. There are 53, 54 rivers cutting across the border with mountains, hills, densely populated areas, and even densely forested areas towards the northeast. So the geography is very complex, making it very porous. There are many natural gaps in the border, and this enables number of illegal, illicit activities. There has been large-scale cross-border infiltration from many decades. Insurgents, terrorists, especially northeast insurgents, few Pakistani-sponsored terrorists have misused the India-Bangladesh border to infiltrate into India by exploiting the gaps present in the border. Organized crime has flourished over here, from drug trafficking and arms trafficking to human trafficking to even cattle smuggling. All these illicit criminal activities have flourished along with large-scale illegal migration, especially in 1970s, 80s and 90s. Bangladesh became a contributor of large-scale illegal migrants into India, which even led to problems in northeast India. It led to demographic changes, leading to socio-ethnic tensions in states like Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, and even became the root cause for native insurgencies in these states in northeast India. So we have faced many such security challenges, and some of it persists even today. Now, during this recent meeting, both the security forces have agreed that illegal migration has gone down substantially, especially after the interim government took over. In fact, the BSF had informed the parliament as well a few years ago that since 2009-2010, illegal migration has declined substantially from Bangladesh. It has not come to an end. It continues, but the scale of illegal migration has gone down very, very drastically. The peak illegal migration was between 1970s to early 2000s. These 30-40 years is when we've witnessed the large-scale illegal migration happening. But post 2009, we have seen a substantial decline, and especially after the new interim government came to power, the BSF has also agreed with the border guards of Bangladesh that illegal migration and infiltration has gone down substantially. But there are some concerns that have been raised by the BSF. For example, the targeting of religious minorities like Hindus and other religious minority groups. We have raised issues of persistent criminal activity and border management issues that we have regarding fencing the border. There is a dispute between BSF and the BGP. All these issues have been discussed, and both sides have agreed to cooperate with each other to ensure that the security interests of both countries are not compromised. Next, on page 14, we have another important article regarding regulation of OTT platforms. OTT stands for over-the-top platforms, your streaming services, Netflix, Disney Hotstar, which is Jio Hotstar now, Amazon Prime, etc. So, OTT content, which delivers movies, documentaries, web series, etc. as a form of entertainment, recreation and information, this content has been regulated by India through the IT rules of 2021. In 2021, under the IT Act, the Ministry of Electronics and IT notified the new set of IT rules for intermediaries, which applies for social media firms as well, which applies for digital media and as well as for OTT platforms. Through the IT rules, self-regulation has been promoted for OTT platforms. Self-regulating the content. Let's say the content is adult, mature content. The IT rules mandate these companies, these OTT firms, to ensure that the content is age restricted and accordingly rated as per the age of the audience. This has been made a legal mandate that OTT firms have to self-regulate and rate the content. If content is adult, or if it is universal, if everybody can watch it, or till what age group can children, minors can watch this content. This rating, age rating of content has been made mandatory. Age restricting adult mature content has been made mandatory. The government will not directly interfere. It's left to these OTT firms, but they have to do it on their own as per the IT rules. And if there are any violations, let's say there are grievances for the public where the users feel that adult content has not been rated or it has not been age restricted, then those grievances can also be taken up through a 3-tier grievance redressal mechanism that has been set up through the IT rules. There is a 3-layered grievance redressal mechanism set up under the IT rules for OTT sector. First is at the level of each OTT firm. Since self-regulation is the mantra, the government didn't want to stifle free speech. It didn't want to curb artistic and creative expression. It allowed obscene content, including sexually explicit content, nudity, profanity, and even use of drugs, showcasing of tobacco, alcohol consumption as part of artistic creative expression. This can be part of movies and any other creative content which is made, as long as the right warnings are placed, right advisories are placed, and the content is rated as per the age of the audience and age restricted as well, as per the adult and mature content present in that video. So if there is a grievance, the user or consumer can file a complaint with the company itself. There should be an option to flag that content and the company should take some action, right? If it goes against the standards, it should take down such content, block that, or try to delete only that part of the content. Or if it doesn't violate its guidelines, it should inform that user that it does not violate our guidelines and we will not be taking any action on it. So this is the first level of regulation. At the level of the company, each individual OTT firm has to give the option to raise grievances and address those grievances. Now, if you're not happy with the grievance redressal of the OTT firm, there should be a appeal where you can take the grievance. There should be appellate platform. So there is a industry level association which IT rules has urged the OTT firms to set up, where these appeals can be heard. All OTT firms come together to form an industry level association to enforce the new IT rules so that the grievances of the consumers and citizens can be heard and action can be taken against objectionable content. And even if this fails, finally there is a third level of grievance redressal at the level of the government. The Government of Information Broadcasting will set up a committee, an interministerial committee, to look into these grievances which have not been addressed by the OTT firm and by the OTT industry. Now this is where there is a controversy and a criticism, that even though government is saying that it's promoting self-regulation, it wants to promote free speech and creative expression, why is the government giving itself a role to regulate the content by providing for a government monitored committee, a government appointed committee as the third tier of grievance redressal? Because this will essentially allow the government to issue orders to OTT firms to take down content, block certain content which can be possibly misused to take away your free speech and creative expression. Now, in the light of the recent controversy with regard to India's Got Latent, the Ranveer Allahabadiya incident, the INV ministry has warned OTT firms. It has issued a warning to strictly follow the IT rules, to ensure that content is appropriately rated as per the age of the audience, and adult mature content is age restricted. It has even advised them to avoid obscene content. Even though obscene content is not banned, government is telling OTT firms to avoid obscene content. Now this is essentially going to have the chilling effect. The doctrine of chilling effect comes into play here. Now when you see that artists are being targeted with cases and threats and abuses for whatever content they are carrying, eventually it creates a fear mindset. Even if it is legally allowed, right? Individuals, artists and companies might restrict themselves, remove such content, which becomes a restriction on free speech. Yes, obscenity needs to be flagged, but when it comes to artistic format, let the audience decide whether they want to watch this or not. Adult audience, they have a right to decide whether they want to watch something or not. That's why you give them a prior warning at the start regarding what kind of content is present. If you've seen on OTT platforms, at the start, disclaimers are given that there is drug abuse shown in this movie, or there is sexually explicit content, nudity in this movie, or gore and violence present in this movie. Then block such content for children. Create age restriction mechanisms through parental locks. So parents can set a lock and children, minors will not be exposed to it. So ensure that you rate the content appropriately, so audience knows whether it's age appropriate content or not. That is sufficient with some grievance redressal mechanism. But any direct government interference, government issuing orders like this, saying you should avoid obscene content, strictly follow the laws, this creates that fear mindset amongst the companies, creating a chilling effect which eventually can curb free speech. So that is the development here. Next, one last topic, one big topic, then we come to the prelim section quickly. The Digital Personal Data Protection Act, enacted in 2023, has a major problem. Whether it's a mistake by the government which drafted the law, or whether it was added deliberately, it's still not clear. There is one major mistake which has been flagged by activists. See, with regard to this law, the Digital Personal Data Protection Law, the focus is to protect data privacy and the data security of individuals. Individuals, the users, are recognized as data principals under this law, meaning individuals are the owners of their data. You can determine how your data will be utilized by the intermediaries. That is the data fiduciaries as recognized by the law. It could be private social media companies or any private firm, government entities as well, which are collecting, processing, handling your data. They have certain obligations on them to protect your data privacy and data security. So you need to provide consent to allow the fiduciaries to use your data. You need to give permissions essentially, so that the fiduciaries can collect, process and harvest your data. And you can even demand certain rights, like right to be forgotten, right to erase your data, right to seek corrections, etc. Now, all of this will require informed consent. I mean, the individual should know about consent they are giving. Obviously, children, minors will have no idea regarding this. They may not be mature enough to understand the concept of consent when it comes to their data privacy. So, in the case of children, under the data protection law, the parents or the guardians are empowered to give the consent with regard to the data privacy of minor children. Now, this is absolutely fine. But the law has clubbed persons with disability with children. The law says those who suffer from certain types of disabilities, right? The Divyang, even they should get consent from their guardians. This takes away the right of those with disabilities. By clubbing those with disabilities with children and mandating them to get consent from guardians, essentially the law is disempowering persons with disabilities. This is against the legal right which is guaranteed under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. It goes against our international commitment given under the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So activists are demanding the government to make a correction, because those who have disabilities, they need not get consent from guardians, right? Apart from certain specific cases of disabilities, in most other cases, even those who are disabled, who are differently abled, right? They should be able to take their own decisions. They need not wait for guardians to give consent. So clubbing them with children, with minors, and making them get consent from their guardians is a disservice that the law will do to those with different abilities or those who are suffering with disabilities. So this is a controversy which has come out. It's a shortcoming in the law, and activists are demanding the government to amend the law to ensure that those with disabilities are empowered to take their own decisions. Coming to the prelim section, 3 small articles. Let's go through them one by one. Microsoft has unveiled a new quantum chip known as Majorana 1, which is seen as a big leap in the field of quantum computing. Quantum computers work on these qubits, which is fundamentally different from the regular bits that you see in traditional classical computing. See, a bit can exist in either of the two states as 0 or 1. Now, this is a big limitation on traditional classical computers. It limits their ability to conduct complex processes and operations. Whereas a quantum computer, which employs the concept of quantum physics, a qubit can coexist in multiple states at the same time. So this enormously, exponentially increases the quantum computing capability of a quantum computer, a qubit computer. So this is a critical emerging technology that countries are racing to develop. Big companies are making some big investments, and Microsoft has announced a big breakthrough by announcing this quantum chip known as Majorana 1, which apparently is one of the most advanced quantum chips to have been developed. So please take a note of this. It's called Majorana 1 because it's named after a subatomic particle, Majorana fermion, which has been used to stabilize the quantum qubits. The one big challenge with quantum computing is that it's very difficult to stabilize the qubits, to maintain them in a stable state. They collapse very easily. So by using this exotic subatomic particle called Majorana fermion, Microsoft has built a stable quantum computing chip, and this is seen as a big breakthrough. These quantum computers, if we ever realize what we have thought about in theory, then it can exponentially increase computing capability. Traditional computers, if they take, let's say, hundreds, millions of years to solve complex equations, that can be solved in seconds and minutes by quantum computers. That is the scale and speed that we are talking about. Next, on page 15, we have another article that refers to the WTO's technical barriers to trade. The government of India is contemplating certain quality controls for furniture industry, which will affect the Swedish furniture giant IKEA. The government is trying to come out with some new quality standards. It's issuing a quality order for the furniture sector, which might affect foreign companies such as IKEA. So this company, along with the Swedish government, they have taken note of this government order from the Indian government, and they are seeing this as a barrier, a technical barrier being imposed on trade, which could be a violation of WTO norms. So what is this technical barriers to trade laid down under WTO, under World Trade Organization? See, countries have a right to restrict trade by setting some technical standards, some quality standards, in order to protect their environment, in order to ensure the quality of a product, also to ensure human safety and to protect human health. Countries have a right to bring some standards and regulations, some technical standards and regulations, so they can restrict certain goods. They can restrict certain products which can be hazardous or which don't meet the quality standards prescribed. But however, this can become a barrier to trade, a technical barrier to trade. If the regulations and restrictions are too strict, too stringent, and if it is discriminatory against some countries, it can create a unequal trading balance, unequal trade balance, affecting fair trade in the world, in a globalized world. So to prevent the misuse of these technical regulations and parameters, WTO has an agreement on technical barriers to trade. If a country is affected by strict regulations and standards which appear to be unfair and discriminatory, they can seek remedy through WTO by filing a case against the other country. So the quality order that the government is contemplating for furniture sector can affect companies like IKEA, because the government is looking to mandate certain local procurement requirements, that the raw material and components should be locally procured, domestically procured, to increase the indigenization, to create opportunities within the Indian economy. So this can hurt foreign furniture giants like IKEA, and they are interpreting this as a technical barrier to trade, and this can potentially become a WTO issue between India and Sweden. Coming to the last article for today, on the page number 15, we have an article. It says the government is looking to lease out 10 airports under PPP model. A few flourishing airports in tier 2, tier 3 cities like Amritsar, Varanasi, Indore, Tiruchi, even Tirupati, Hubli, etc. The government has shortlisted them by working with Airports Authority of India. These are some key assets, national assets. The government is looking to monetize them by leasing them out for the private sector through a public-private partnership model. Now, this is part of the National Monetisation Plan. The National Monetisation Plan was announced by the Modi government in the 2021-22 budget, and it has been rolled out from 2022. It will be implemented till 25-26. The idea is to monetize certain national assets, few core and non-core assets like expressways, a few public sector entities and companies, or infrastructure projects like airports. They can be leased out to the private sector because it can help attract private investment. Also, it can help bring private expertise, bringing efficiency into the management of critical projects. So it will also bring private investments into key infrastructure sectors which the government has already developed. So it will help in smooth operations of these facilities, also bring in private expertise and efficiency. So that is the objective of the National Monetisation Plan. So on this note, I bring my discussion to an end. We've discussed all the key topics in complete detail. I hope you guys have liked and understood everything. So do let me know what you think in the comments. Do press the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.